what I'd like to do now is to bring these ideas from Derrida into conversation with the Bible. I want to do this in two ways. And the first question that I want to ask is God outside the text? We've been saying there's nothing outside the text. Well, where does God fit in that picture? Now, I've been slightly disingenuous in asking the question in that way, because the first thing that I think is important to point out is that asking that sort of question isn't actually incredibly helpful, because it's asking us to articulate what the Bible says in the terms of reference set forth by Derrida. Now, so far, I've been letting Derrida speak for himself to set his own terms of the debate and to help us understand reality along with him. I think the only ultimately rigorous and respectful way of bringing a philosophy into conversation with the Bible is to let the Bible do the same thing. Let us see how the Bible sets up an understanding of reality, and then bring the two into conversation with each other. So I was slightly cheeky in asking the question, is God outside the text? It's more an illustration of something that I think is unhelpful to ask. So let's set things up as the Bible sees it. How does the Bible understand reality in a way that we can then bring into conversation with Derrida? Well, if you remember, Derrida left us with two options. There's his own différence, where both speech and writing, everything that exists differently. And there's the logocentrism or phonocentrism that he rejects, which is a privilege of speech over writing, a privilege of presence as the mode of being of everything. Now, if we ask the question, where does the Bible fit in that picture? The answer is it doesn't really fit at all. It's neither Derrida's option nor the option that he's rejecting. I want to introduce a word to describe that relation, therefore. It's a word that's going to be really useful to us. The word is diagonalization. And all I mean by it is this, that the Bible doesn't conform to a dichotomy handed to it by a non-biblical philosopher, in this case Derrida. The Bible simply doesn't fit in the two options that Derrida gives us. It's not logocentric or phonocentric in his terms, and it's not amenable to différence in his terms either. And therefore it sits athwart, it sits diagonally in relation to the options he gives us. And in the language that I'm using, it diagonalizes his options. It's a really important move, I think, because so often the Bible doesn't conform to the categories that we could be tempted to analyze it in terms of. And it's important not simply to take wholesale a set of categories established or elaborated in some sort of discipline outside the Bible and then expect to be able to articulate the Bible simply in terms of those categories, which is why diagonalization, I think, is an important tool in coming to grips with philosophy in a way that brings it into conversation with the Bible. How does the Bible set things up in its own terms? Well, really crucial to the way it views reality is what theologians have called the creator-creature distinction. We can see it really clearly in John chapter 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. Okay, so we've got one mode of being, if you like. There's God and the Word. They're in the beginning together. Now we've got a second mode of being that comes through. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. This all things, everything that exists in the universe, is different to God. It wasn't there in the beginning. It doesn't exist in the same way as him. So there are two different modes of being here in this passage and in the Bible more broadly. There's a distinction between the being of the Creator and the being of creation or the creature. And this is really important because for both the situation that Derrida rejects, logocentrism, and his own différence, there's only one mode of being. Everything that exists in the same way. In terms of logocentrism, it exists as presence, and for Derrida's own différence, it exists as difference and deferral. But the Bible has two distinct modes of being. God's being is different to the being of creation. He exists differently. And that is fundamental to a biblical understanding of the world. The Reformed apologist and theologian Cornelius Van Til puts the importance of the creator-creature distinction in these terms. He says, I point out that the Bible does contain a theory of reality. And this theory of reality is that of two levels of being. First, of God as infinite, eternal and unchangeable. And second, of the universe as derivative, finite, temporal and changeable. A position is best known by its most basic differentiation. The meanings of all words in the Christian theory of being depend upon the differentiation between the self-contained God and the created universe. So then, in order to understand how the Bible relates to what Derrida is saying, the first brick in the wall is the creator-creature distinction. Things in the Bible are set up differently because there are two distinct ways of existing. It's not an option that Derrida accounts for, either in his own position or in the position he rejects. So therefore, God in the Bible is not outside the text in the sense that Derrida means outside, completely beyond, standing in isolation from. That's not God's relation to his creation at all. The Bible doesn't speak about him being remote or isolated. God is above creation in the sense of being in authority over it, not in the sense of being distant or unapproachable or ungraspable. Secondly, God is not inside either. God is not caught up in the circulation of meanings within textuality, but he is intimate with his creation. The Bible talks about him walking with the nation of Israel, or individuals in the Old Testament period, and of course his spirit in the hearts of believers in the New Testament period. God is not within in terms of constricted by or contained within the world, within creation, but he is intimate with creation, upholding it moment by moment by the word of his power, as Hebrews 1 says. So the Bible insists upon the right to redefine what inside and outside mean before being willing to accept those terms. And therefore the picture of the reality that the Bible is painting is fundamentally, significantly different, sits askance, sits athwart Derrida's picture. He neither agrees with Derrida completely nor disagrees with him completely.